Hello. This is a archived discussion for you on power and influence, uh, uh, and it also supports the assignment associated with this module. And I would like to just kind of give a context for this. You know, we're discussing a lot of theories about leadership in this course, and I've been focusing attention on your skills and abilities, your traits, also talking about various different models in the first few weeks. But underlying a lot of understanding of leadership is the concept of power, and it's pretty important to talk about power. And from your perspective, what power means. So let me share a few thoughts with you on this. You know, the difference between someone who can get an idea off the ground and accepted in an organization and someone who can't isn't just a question of who has the better ideas or does the better thinking. Another issue is who has political competence. Political competence is a skill you can learn, and when we talk about politics in an organization, we're talking about power. We're talking about influence. So think about it a minute. How do you get things done? And in a sense, that's what leadership is about, is getting things done. The effective use of power is one of the most critical elements of management. The most effective leaders, I think we'll find, make others feel powerful. And the most effective leaders untap the power in other people. And the final thing, it's truly difficult to do unusual and perform in unusual ways without some political clout or ability to influence or power. There's a lot of negativity associated with power. Also, power is to be viewed. If you feel powerful, you feel you have personal efficacy. You need power to help mold and shape your environment. Many times, people who feel powerless are molded by what's going on around them. So here's a list of some things that a manager with power or a leader with power, here are some indicators of that power and what can happen with it. You can read down through these. The relationship between power and personal effectiveness is key. So when we talk about leadership, we're talking about you influencing as a leader, you being personally effective. In many ways, both the lack of power and the abuse of power are equally debilitating and counterproductive. So in many ways, when we talk about power, it's a concept we sometimes in our culture don't like to think about. And sometimes we think we've seen many extremely powerful people who have abused their power, but also people have used their power to accomplish great things. And, you know, there is a fine line between abuse of power and being empowered. In other words, you use your power to make others feel powerful. That's when effectiveness is at its greatest. I like this chart. It talks about your personal power and how it's related to performance. Excessive use of power over others may lead to an abuse of it. However, having no power at all makes one possibly ineffective. And so there's kind of a sweet spot, a fine line between abusing power and using it for proper, to empower others for a greater good. Do you use your power for a common good? Or do you use it for your own aggrandizement? Power, in my mind, means the potential to influence behavior. In a lot of traditional definitions of power, we saw it meaning having authority over others, the ability to force them to do things. I kind of like the notion of being able to get things done. In many ways, when we talk about leadership, that's what we're talking about, getting things done. And the implication for all of us is not that we need to avoid the use of power, but we need to learn how to use it wisely. I think that is the real issue, using power wisely, because power is a critical ingredient in leadership. So how do you do what I'm talking about? How do you gain power? How do you overcome feelings of powerlessness? And then how do you convert that power into influence in ways that avoid abusing it? So I think this is a good way to step back and think about yourself. A couple sources of power are who you are, some personal characteristics of you, kind of a person-based view of power. And then another is where are you? A positional view of power. So if I asked you to think about yourself and how you are getting power, where do you see those sources of your own power? Well, in the person point of view, one is expertise. You have knowledge. This is where a lot of consultants get their power. They have expertise. They have the ability to influence. Hopefully, you're letting me influence you because here's one of the reasons: knowledge and experience. Another source of power for you is personal attraction, likableness. We tend to let people influence us who are likable if they have a charisma, if they have agreeable behavior, or in what's aligned here is certain physical characteristics. A couple more sources of power of who you are is, one is effort. Are you dependable? Do you really go the full mile to get things done? We tend to give people power who put a lot of effort into things. And then the last one is legitimacy. And that has to do with, are you seen as a person who really embodies the values of what your organization or what you're all about? So these are, I think, 4 ways to think about personal power. If you read the chapter in the textbook on power, it covers these topics in a slightly different way. But I find these 4 definitions a good way to think about building personal power. And then there's a certain amount of power that comes from where you are. You can think about this in a place of employment You can think about this in terms of any organization you're involved with. One concept of position is centrality. Do you have access to information? Are you in the know? Do you know what's going on? Do you have flexibility? Do you have flexibility to move around? Do you have a lot of autonomy in what you do? Does your position give you flexibility? That's a source of power. Another one is, how visible are you? Or how visible are the things that you're doing? How visible are they to other influential people? And then the relevance of what you're doing. Are you doing work that is aligned to priorities in whatever organization you're in? So I like these two different ways of thinking about your personal power from the perspective of where you are and the other perspective of who you are. So when we're talking about power, we also talk about then how you use that power, and how you can influence other people. Well, one of the ways we attempt to influence is by retribution. In other words, force others to do what you say. Coercion is a big one. Threaten people. Have people fear punishment. Another way is intimidation, putting pressure on people. So in many ways, we give power to people who have the ability to reward us or punish us. But retribution is, you're using a style of influence where you're trying to force someone. Probably one of the most common styles is reciprocity. And again, one of the most direct approaches is bargaining with somebody. And again, you give me power if I have the power to reward you. So you'll do what I say because I give you something in return. That's reciprocity. Or I might be doing favors for you in an attempt to ingratiate you or obligate you. They all come under the notion of reciprocity. And then another that really is a two-way street is we try to use reason, try to bring you into the decision. Show that what I want you to do makes sense. And you're going to go along with me and be influenced by me because what I want you to do really makes sense. Or I might appeal to your values. I might appeal to your desires, all those kind of things. Reason probably is the approach we use most often today in organizations. So if we look at thinking of power for yourself and thinking of gaining power and power being related to leadership, take a look at the personal side, expertise, personal attraction, effort and legitimacy, and then where you fit. Are you central? Are you visible? These all lead to power in you. Sometimes, we select a proper strategy, and we may have assertive responses to inappropriate influence attempts by others. We increase authority via upward influence. These are all ways we utilize that power. And hopefully we utilize it in ways that are not abusive. So that just kind of is a general way to think about power and identify it and analyze it. Let me move on to a few more thoughts about power. Another way, what are some things that might be obstacles that prevent you from having the amount of influence that you need? And sometimes the culture of an organization can make some parts of the business more influential than others. Again, this is when I'm talking about the position, like in a consumer products firm, like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, etc. Marketing, it's more a marketing culture. So being able to fit that marketing culture would be a way to make you more influential. It might be a way to make you and make you more effective or ineffective. Or say in a technology-driven company, Hewlett Packard, or engineering or research and development, that part of the culture may have more influence or power. In a lot of organizations, the staff side, or the staff side of the organization often lacks influence. It could be the finance, or the accounting area, or the HR area. So this kind of goes to when we talk about position, how organization and culture can influence, or it's just the reality that critical other people control needed resources, or they possess required information, or they set priorities on important activities and have to agree and cooperate if plans are to be implemented. They cannot be ordered around because they are under another's area of control, and can legitimately say no because they have many other valid priorities. They respond only when they choose to. So what are those elements that helps others respond to you? This whole slide is another way of thinking about politics. Fortunately, research shows that we can often enhance the influence we have on others, even when we lack formal organizational power. And, again, your personal skills and your behavior, like I opened with at the beginning of this presentation, play a critical role in determining how much you influence others. There's a researcher by the name of Keltner, and the assignment I'm giving you with this module has an interview and a discussion about some of Keltner's research. Research has found that the powerful are less dependent on others and therefore less motivated to pay attention to them. The powerful tend to view others as means to their own goals. Power sometimes reduces your perspective taking. But some of these can lead to more negative views of people in power. Power is associated with diminished emotional reactions. A lot of people in power have less empathy and compassion to those who suffer. Those with more power experience less distress and less compassion. Power undermines responses to a counterpart's emotions in conflict and negotiation. The powerful tend to discard information by others. These are all based on some research on the issue of power. Power increases moral hypocrisy. Powerful people tend to impose strict moral standards on other people, but practice less strict behavior on oneself. Now, research has found that compared with the powerless, the powerful condemn other people's cheating more, but cheat more themselves. They are very strict in judging other people's moral transgressions than judging their own. All of these are reasons, if you think about what I'm talking about here, of why we view power with negativity, or why we are real concerned or maybe feel negative toward people in power with good reason. A high power is associated with greater infidelity among both men and women. Why? Because power increases confidence in the ability to attract other people. There's some interesting studies of the upper class that Keltner talks about. Couple of the video I show you talks about some of this, that upper class people, in spite of their advantages, have a lot of empathy deficits. And why is that? It's harder for them to feel empathetic toward others. Who was it, Marie Antoinette? When told that the peasants were going hungry, she said, "Let them eat cake." That's an example of this. Well, why is that? Well, it's been suggested that those lower in the socioeconomic sector have to rely more on neighbors or relatives, and therefore have to develop more effective social skills that engender goodwill. In other words, if you have to rely a lot on others, you develop those skills to help you interact with them. 7 studies using experimental and naturalistic methods found that upper-class individuals behave more unethically than lower-class individuals. Upper class are more likely to break the law while driving. There's a lot of laboratory studies. Upper middle class people have more favorable attitudes toward greed. So, there are some difficulties with how we tend to look at the 1%ers. And it's more than the 1%ers. So, social class affects whether we are motivated to attend to others. People's social class affects the extent to which others are seen as worth attending to. 3 studies found that social classes differ in the amount of attention shown to each other. High-ranking people at the top of the hierarchy expected to stop unethical behavior. But occupying a high-ranking role within an organization can lead people to identify more strongly with their organization and thus not see unethical practices as being wrong in the first place. I'm rushing through a lot of this research, but sometimes having more power and being in powerful positions does have its downsides, and it's good to be aware of these things. Inexperience ineffective organizational members grumble about not having enough formal power to get work done, and they covet the influence wielded at higher levels. In contrast, savvy organizational members realize that informal network power is available to individuals at all levels. Furthermore, they understand that informal personal power generally proceeds rather than follows from formal organizational power. So I guess the whole issue here is that just being in a formal position of power is not the only way you can influence. And in many ways, being aware of your own ability to influence others, even when you're not in a position of power, can go a long way to giving you that ability to influence and be seen as an influencer. So hopefully this has been helpful. Kind of a quick overview. There's a couple assignments associated with this. This is a little different than how material was covered in the textbook, but this covers a lot of the same ground. I think one of the big issues, and why I talked a little bit more about some of the downsides of power, is that if we are in powerful positions, it's real important to be aware of some of the pitfalls that are there for us, or some of the ways that we maybe get caught up in having power. All right, that wraps up this recording. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you.